Hey everyone, this is John from EastCoastArmory.com, and I'm here today with a project update video for this 1/6 scale Cadillac Gage XM706 V100 Armored car. And this is a project that several of my viewers may have thought I've forgotten about and just left it in a partially completed format, but that is definitely not, nor will it ever be the case. The model that you see here is now fully completed. That's right, the last of the details have been added to this model in order to bring it up to the condition that we see here. In this video, we're going to be going over the final details that were added to this model to bring it across the finish line. So stay tuned because there's going to be a bunch of really cool info coming right at you. Picking up exactly from where we left off in the last video brings us to the parts that we have here on the table. In the previous video, I mentioned that the turret interior and exterior was complete. However, there were a couple components that were absent because they were hung up in print and I needed to get them into the shop. Well, here are the components now in hand, and at this point here, they're actually ready to head off into paint and then installation. So the components that you see here are the ones that are going to be supplied with the turret set, which is listed, of course, on the ECA V100 catalog. And by the time this video drops, that turret should be available for purchase. So what we have here, starting from left to right, is first the articulation arm. This arm here connects to the inner portion of the mantlet, and it's actually how you raise and depress the two MGs. As you can see, the unit is completely detailed with the shape of the geometry. We have the well beads in the appropriate locations, and probably the coolest aspect is this end section that we have right here. This here is the actual trigger mechanism, and is what would fire the MGs, and you'll see that it has this really cool little guard found on these two sections over here. This was something that really stood out to me when I was studying and crawling around the real V100. And so, of course, I incorporated it into the build. I also want to mention that in the past, trying to get something like this to come out in resin would have been impossible. And, you know, this is something that you would have to be supplied with a length of wire, and you bend it to shape and glue it in place to get the same effect. But, as you can see here, integrally printed on. This piece here is just ready to be painted, weathered, then just plugged directly in place. The next components are these two clear sections that we have here. As I mentioned before, the unit does have some clear components. One is the optic for the main MGs, and that can be seen right here. And these are clear 3D printed. So this is something that's pretty cool. Usually when I do these 3D printings, they tend to be a translucent material, but not this one. This one here I specifically sought out to find if I could get it as clear and as transparent as possible. The other one is this component that we have here, and this is the outer lens section. Does have the right geometry to it. I believe there were two fastener details integrally printed on the CAD file. However, for the piece to go into its refining process, it appears that those details have been polished away. This is something I may revisit, but for the time being, we have here a totally clear lens section, which is pretty cool. And then this brings us to the rubber sections. So the turret does have some components made in rubber, and these would consist of backrests that we have right here. As you can see, they are pre-shaped to the form of the turret. Now these, by the way, are not 3D printed. These are actually done the old school way with cast rubber. However, the masters themselves are 3D printed, much along the lines of several other rubber cast components that are found on the ECA catalog. So back to the backrests, you can see them right over here. Being made out of real rubber, this really lends itself for some excellent detailing, and also, you know, again, it's hard to fake rubber when the thing is actually really rubber. So these pieces here are actually just ready for installation right onto the model. But the coolest part on the turret interior, and it was a bummer that I couldn't get to it earlier, because this is probably the number one thing that stood out to me, and the one thing I loved looking into the most, was the eyepiece protector. The eye cup here was something that when I just saw that on the inside of the vehicle, I'm like, oh yeah, I got to go ahead and make that. It has to be rubber. No exceptions to the rule. It must be made out of rubber. And this is the component that we have right here. So again, made out of a 3D printed master. And every little piece of geometry you see on this was carefully designed from the photographs, the thorough photographs of the real one that I had taken. The piece slips over the optic itself. It has a hose clamp right over here. The hose clamp detailing is integrally printed on. In this case, molded on. And the only other prep work needs to be done to this is just paint the clamp over here. Once you paint that with a little bit of silver paint, you're basically good to go. Of course, once you remove it from the pouring basin, of course. The way you see it is exactly how it comes out of the mold. And as you can see, it does have a failure point right over there, which is by design. So the piece should just carefully amputate off of this section here, and this goes into the bin, and this piece here is ready for installation. I'll probably go ahead and remove it off of the base after the clamp is painted, because this kind of acts as a really handy and convenient little jig to hold the thing, and it just, makes it just a bit easier to manipulate. So, nothing more needs to be said about this stuff. Let's go ahead, go through the painting and the final installation, and that is where we'll cut across later on as the video goes on. With the turret out of the way, it's now time to focus on the last bits of detailing that were required to finalize and complete the V100. And that is starting with what we see on the table right here. So the final bits of equipment go back to the rear plate and revolve around both the tool rack and the jerry can. And what we see on the table is partially what is going to be released on the ECA catalog, which are tool straps. We also have here some tools themselves, be it a pickaxe and a axe head, but this is something I'm going to be mentioning in a moment. What has just been added to the ECA catalog are what we see over here, which are the actual straps themselves. These are the post-World War II tool and equipment straps. If you look at any post-World War II vehicle, you will see that the straps are made out of a green webbing material, and they are held in place with this buckle combination strap spring clamp mechanism thing, and the components that you see on the table are reflecting that. These here are all 3D printed, and as you can see, you have a plethora of straps in order to do the job, and all of these come with the set. However, in addition to these coming with the set, you also get the actual webbing themselves. And this is noteworthy because trying to track down the webbing was something that took quite a bit of time, trying to find a supplier that will even ship these things to me in the United States with the proper color, no less. So, here you can see a sample of the webbing material in question. This here is for the thinner type buckles right over here, and these are the type of webbing that you would find on tie downs for things like tools and other bits of smaller equipment. As you can see, the color is the olive green, which is more than appropriate for a post-World War II vehicle, and the US military has been using this type of a material since the 1950s time frame all the way up until present day. So you can get quite a bit of mileage out of something like this. For the larger straps here, these would be things for like the jerry cans. And here you can see the webbing for that. If anyone's also wondering, I actually have a World War II pattern of sets similar to this here, but with a slightly different design of the buckle, as they didn't have that spring mechanism during that time period. And I do have the appropriate khaki material that would be found on World War II pattern straps for things like Jeeps and Shermans and things along those lines, but that's a topic for another video. But for right now, what has just been listed on the ECA catalog are the post-World War II versions. Circling back to the tools, namely the pickaxe as well as the axe head itself, these are specifically designed for use on the ECA tool rack that I mentioned in the earlier videos. The CAD files themselves are the exact same files that I incorporated on my other World War II and US AFV tool sets that are also found on the ECA catalog. These ones here are just smaller because they need to fit in the confines of the rack, and the racked versions are a bit tinier compared to the ones found on the actual tanks themselves. And again, I have real examples to take measurements of. So, and as well as also, I was able to take very thorough measurements of these units fitted on racks as well as ones on the tank. So it's pretty well planned out. The only thing that's currently missing on the table right now are the actual wooden handles themselves for both of these pieces of equipment. You'll see that as the video progresses. And the next and final bit of equipment that is something that I've been wanting to do and also have quite a few requests for doing for a long time now, and finally I answered the mail. The jerry can. The jerry can is something that it's a ubiquitous piece of equipment, yet for some reason, there's really very few options out there on the 1/6 scale marketplace for. So this was an odyssey all in its own. Rewind our clocks back to when I was working on the project originally. I designed the jerry can holder, which is in two different patterns, World War II and post-war, and I have the post-war one on here. And at the time of filming this, both of those units are going to be posted on the ECA catalog. But the jerry cans themselves were just not around. Dragon had a set of these released back in the mid-2000s time frame, where they had the US pattern of fuel jerry can as well as the US pattern of water cans, and those are basically what were being used for the longest period of time. However, stockpiles on those have dried up, and Dragon's not making them anymore, so what's on the market is on the market, and as I mentioned before, the numbers have been dwindling. So, you know, in today's current age, I'm like, well, let me go ahead and see what jerry cans are on the market. So I hit up the usual sources like AliExpress, eBay, as well as Etsy. Well, there are several individuals out there who are 3D printing 1/6 scale jerry cans. So I picked one up. It was made out of an FDM material, and the can itself was decent. There was nothing wrong with the quality of it. The problem was it was much smaller than it needed to be, and it was just going to stick out like a sore thumb when fitted to my vehicle. So it was at that point there, I decided to roll up my sleeves and say, you know what? It's time. Let me go ahead and actually just do the jerry can. Fortunately, for reference, I didn't have to look far because I have a few legit USGI jerry cans in my collection. So I went into my office with said metal jerry can, and I was able to take the dimensions and the photographs required in order to scale one down to 1/6 scale. And it is with all of that research and with those examples on hand, I was able to bring the component that you see here on the table. This here is the new ECA USGI fuel jerry can. Also, while I'm at it, I didn't just stop with this one, because I also went ahead and designed up the water jerry can, and it is slightly different from the fuel one, as I'll go ahead and throw thumbnails up on screen right now, and you can actually see not just the the water jerry can, but also compared to the fuel jerry can, and you can see them right now on screen. So here's the component in hand. I mean, having CAD files is one thing, but seeing it in the flesh, in the IRL, it's definitely, you know, something that sometimes things can change. And this is the unit right here. This is 3D printed, and it's 3D printed in a resin nylon type material. I've utilized this printer for a few other items that I listed on the ECA catalog, and also built into the V100. And as you can see, the surface quality is excellent. You know, everyone has that stigma of what 3D printed parts look like. You know, have those little lines in them and things along those lines. Not this one. This thing looks as smooth as humanly possible, and the thing almost looks like it's made out of injection molded plastic. Even feels like it's made out of injection molded plastic. So let's just start with the bottom and work our way up. We have the appropriate bottom lip here with the correct depth. Everything has its curved embossed stamping type texturing to it. You can see the crimp line right here around the bottom rim. On the sides of the jerry can, you can see that we have the center rear spine right there, which on the real one it's pressed and stamped and folded over. Those details are built into the ECA one. On the side here, we have that very distinctive X crimp. Note the embossed features, or the features that mimic the embossing right there on the surface. On the reverse side, we have the US stamping. It's only on this side of the can, again, as per the real unit. Right on the top, we have that G stamping right over there. The jerry can does have the appropriate geometry to it, and it is actually not symmetrical, believe it or not. The front curvature is different from the ones on the rear. Hopefully that comes out on camera. The top portion, where the top stamping makes contact with the body, does have this lip that runs along this section over here, and it's pretty distinctive, or I should say it's pretty pronounced on the real example, so I went ahead and replicated as much as possible on the 3D printed one. On the top portion, again, note the subtle geometry right here on the front, as well as the way everything is rounded as it would be stamped on the real unit. And also we have the point right over here, and then it goes down straight, then up again, lifted directly from the real counterpart. The handle itself is a multi-part CAD assembly, and this was done this way just to mimic and mirror as much as possible the real unit. So the real one is made of all stamped sheet metal, of course, and I tried to incorporate as much of those features as possible. So you can see this little rib right over here, and this is where these round sections are bent to shape. The front portion has the appropriate geometry as well as the thickness, and this is actually bent inward, as you can see right over there on the inside. You can see that inner lip. These type of details would have been almost impossible to do outside of 3D printing, so it's taking full advantage of the technology. And we could also see the tab sections of the bottom portion here of the handles and how they would be spot welded on the real one in the exact same locations. We have these two holes over here. These are for use of a chain retention system, which by the way, the chain is supplied with the ECA set. And this here is the opening. Obviously, it is a hollow unit, and everything is to scale thickness. We have that breather hole right there on the top, and we also have the bushing right here on the inner portion. On the cap itself, it's a separate piece, as you can see. The cap, again, very realistic, or as much as I can humanly design. So we have this shape of the bottom with the appropriate geometry, with the bottom washer right over there. The little handles are actually metal that would be folded over, and it's not symmetrical. You can see how it tapers inward. The top lid itself overhangs from the bottom stamping, and this detailing was brought into the ECA component. Scale thickness, of course. And the unit that the chain connects to is, again, a stamped sheet metal strap. It has a hole in the middle, and this is where there would be an eyelet coming out of it where you could connect the chain. Now, I also want to mention that in addition to offering the cans themselves, I by request also have a set of just the caps over here in case you want to upgrade the Dragon 1/6 scale Jerry cans that are out there for Jeeps and other things along those lines. That's something that could, be used to top off the Dragon one and improve it from the stock original. Back to what I mentioned before about the Dragon Jerry can. As a quick compare and contrast, let's compare the brand new ECA one with the older one from Dragon. Like I stated before, the Dragon one, in my opinion, was the gold standard and the benchmark of the best American World War II Jerry cans that were available in 1/6 scale. And, well, I'm fortunate enough to have an example of one right here on the table. This here is the unit from Dragon. As I mentioned before, overall a pretty decent piece. Let's compare the two side by side. So scale-wise, I tried to make mine as close to spec with the Dragon one as possible, and this was done, one, because in my opinion, the Dragon one is accurately scaled, and the second reason is also because it will work with, the Dragon Jeeps that are on the market, as well as other, Dragon accessories. So, dimension-wise, they are very, very similar. But when you compare and contrast the details, like I stated before, there are some things that are absent on the Dragon one which are found on the real counterparts, like the rear center spine, like I mentioned before. Note the handle is very, very simplified on the Dragon one compared to the ECA one. Note the inside is just a big solid chunk. And the one I developed is much more realistic, and even I simulate the rounded end sections. You can see there on the reverse side on how that actually looks in person. As for the chain on this one, this is something I added to it when I built my Dragon Jeep all those years ago. As for the caps, you can see the Dragon one and the ECA one. The Dragon is hollow. And the ECA one, like I stated before, can drop directly onto the Dragon counterpart if you're looking to just spruce up your older Dragon ones. One other thing to mention about the ECA Jerry cans is that they are sold in a few different options. So you have them individually, you have them in pairs, and I also have them in a complete set where you get the mounting bracket along with the strapping equipment included as well. And all these, you know, fluctuate on the prices that are out there on the ECA catalog. So if you're looking for your Jerry cans, they are found in the link listed below in the video description. So from here, this one's going back in the collection. This guy here is going to head off into paint, and these guys over here I'm going to start painting, as well as also sanding down the wood required for the tools themselves. Jumping forward a little bit, we have the straps fully painted, weathered, and have the webbing material fastened in place. At this point here, these are ready to be actually secured to the vehicle, which we will touch upon momentarily. But before I do, I just want to go ahead and show these pieces off now that they are fully assembled. So I'll start with the large one for the Jerry can. The buckles are just painted with flat black spray paint, and I did a little dry brushing on them to give them the look that you see here. The strap was cut to length, wrapped around the center buckle right over here, and I just simply glued it in place with a little bit of super glue, and it does the job perfectly fine. Same is also going to be true for the other units that I'm going to show momentarily. To fit the unit in place, you just basically pull it through the tab. The strap does, or I should say the spring clip does not actually work, it's just there for looks, but you know, you do get the idea of the function. And then this section here simply wraps around and goes through this portion of the buckle right here, giving you the look that you see presently. It actually does hold it in pretty well, even though the spring mechanism is, you know, non-functional. For the little ones, the exact same thing applies. Glued in the exact same format. And the functionality is also exactly the same. The big one is nothing more than the little one here, just scaled up. Like literally just I put into my program and I just bumped it up to make it fit the wider ribbon, and there you go. All set. So with these out of the way, it's now time to bring out the tools and the Jerry can, which are sitting off camera. And by the way, guys, they look awesome. Let's go ahead and bring them on the table to get a good look at them before installation. And with the tools on the table, you get to see exactly what I was referring to. So the tools that you see here are really, I guess, a pre-production idea of what the units are going to look like. The axe and the pickaxe are definitely finalized. Those are perfect and ready to go right now. The only thing that I'm hesitant on, or I should say it's still in development, is designing a 3D printed shovel, because shovels are actually pretty hard with their geometry, oddly enough. So that one's still in development right now. The one that you see here is actually a resin, cast resin version. This was something I made a mold of many years ago, and I just use it on my own personal builds. This is actually a copy of the Dragon shovel that's supplied with their Jeep kit, and I figured, you know, shovels I need a lot, so I went ahead and made a mold of it, again, for use just on my own personal builds. But for the actual production sets, though, I'm going to have one designed in 3D and have it 3D printed, so I could have it as a supplied set to go along with the tool rack that I was referencing earlier, and you're going to see again when these tools get strapped to the unit. So outside of that, you can also see the other components that are made out of wood. And just like with the other tool set that I referenced in a few videos ago, namely my product announcement videos, the tool handles are made out of real wood. So But on this one here, they're slightly different in dimensions, again, to fit with the smaller confines required for the tool rack. So let me start with the pickaxe head, or I should say the pickaxe handle. This unit here, again, all wood, as is the handle on the axe, as well as also the components here for the shovel. So really quick, you'll notice on this build here, I did something a little bit different compared to my usual 1/6 scale builds, where generally on those, I tend to have the tool heads painted and weathered, accordingly, and I leave the wooden components left in their El Natural wood color, maybe treated and weathered in that type of a format. For this one, though, I wanted to do something different. So, like I referenced in my 1/35 scale videos, on military vehicles past World War II, and this was also done during World War II as well, the tools that you see strapped to the sides of vehicles were all overpainted with olive drab. And I wanted to incorporate that on this example. So you'll see that everything is painted OD. However, you can see the distressed look leaving for the look that you see presently. So to paint the units, first the parts that would be metal on the real ones were primed with flat black spray paint. Then I went ahead and assembled them to their wooden handles, and then the entire unit was painted with Tamiya olive drab via the airbrush. Once the base coat dried, I did a little weathering of a filter here or there. From there, the entire tool itself was coated in the Tamiya black panel line accent, given for that grungy look. And then finally, it was time to do the fun part, which was to distress the wood. And this was done with just my small miniature box cutter. This little guy right here, I use it as an X-Acto on all of my models, and did the job perfectly fine. Made short work of the surfaces. I just went up and down randomly, hitting the edges, focusing a little bit more effort on those, as those generally chip faster than the middle sections. But I just went over all the areas and left for the excellent distress look that you see here. And as you can see, everything looks absolutely perfect. This is just stellar. These tools here, once strapped to the model, are just going to make it just looks so great. It's a nice focal point on the rear section of the V100. Paired with the tool straps, it's definitely going to pan out to be something really cool. And good thing that I pretty much saved this for the latter portion of this project. We also have here, again, this shovel. It just came out so good. I'm really happy in how this turned out. I'm definitely going to be incorporating this technique on a lot of other builds that I have in the pipeline, be it from World War II or even beyond. But yeah, definitely something that looks great. On these type of tools, or I should say on these type of accessories over here, you do have some options available, of course. You can roll with it like I did here with everything overpainted in OD. You could use olive green also. The Army was messing around, or I guess transitioning during the 1960s and 1970s time frame with different type of shades. Or you can go with just a more traditional route where the tool handles are left in their wood color and they're strapped up to the side. There were a bunch left over in inventory in that format. So again, you have a lot of options available for the builder. But this one here, I wanted to do something a little bit different, so I went with the approach that you see presently. But as awesome as these parts are, and as much of a focal point as these parts are going to be, that's not the creme of the creme of this video here. That is going to be the jerry can. Let's go ahead and bring that bad boy out on the table. Before I bring the finished jerry can out, let's take one last look of the Dragon one, which again, I'm going to stress, for the longest time, this was the best jerry can out there in 1/6 scale, specifically, again, for the USGI one. The German ones were nothing to sneeze at, too. They were excellent, but, for the purposes of this video, USGI. Now let's bring out the ECA one. So, with the unit fully painted, you can see how all of those details and features that I referenced before really come into their own. The thing was an absolute blast. The paint adhered onto this material as good as it does on standard injection molded polystyrene. For the paintwork, of course, flat black, spray paint is the primer. Then the green is Tamiya olive drab, applied via the airbrush. Once the green was fully set, masked the area up, painted the top portion here with the airbrush, and that's Tamiya flat red. Then it went through its weathering process, which would include a wash, as well as just Tamiya panel line accents to get that dingy look, which would be appropriate for a gas can. I went with the red top for a reason. I'll mention that in a second, but here you get to see the final chain work added right there on the top. Hopefully that comes out on camera. And the chain consists of basically an eyelet and a dogleg piece of bent metal. This is just done with floor wire. The wire is supplied, by the way, with the ECA kits, as well as you can see a few links of chain right there, and that too is also supplied with the set. The unit is still fully functional, as you can see. And building and painting this unit, I really did have a blast with. This was fun. I enjoyed this aspect of the build probably more than I thought I would, believe it or not. But again, it just came out to be an excellent piece. Now, if you're wondering why did you paint the top red, well, that's because I have a real USGI surplus jerry can with the red top. If anyone's wondering, the red top was painted on several post-war examples of these units, specifically due to mark them for gasoline. And I did unscrew the cap just to take a final whiff just to make sure it was gasoline, and yes, it is definitely gasoline. Why this is relevant? Because, well, on the V100 Armored car, if we can recall from the interview video that I did with the owner of an actual unit, he said that the V100 was gasoline powered, not diesel, specifically the ones in service in Vietnam, serving with the US military. So, with that information, also as a quick homage to the real example that I have here, I went ahead and made this version basically parroting the real one.
Breathtaking. I shall call him Mini-Me.
Also, it's important to point out that yes, this was the unit that I used as reference when I was coming up with the CAD files for the Mini-Me version that we have here. So if it's on this one, it's going to be on this one. With the last of the parts strewn out on the table, this truly marks the end of this project. These are the very last of the detail fittings needed to be added to the model in order to get this thing finally and fully completed. That's right. Once these are fitted in place, this project is officially donezo. So there's no point talking any further in the shop. I'm going to go ahead and gather up these parts, take them to the display area where I have the model, and just get this one fully completed by getting them fitted in place. Uh-oh. Black tabletop, black gloves. That can only mean one thing, and that is the turret at this point is finished. So earlier on in the video, I showed the last of the remaining details required to get this thing finalized, and at this point now, they have all been painted, weathered, and fitted in place. Also, at this time, I want to mention that the T50 turret has now been added to the ECA V100 catalog, and that information, along with the pricing, can be found in the video description link listed below. So, back to the piece that we have here. So, with the turret in its close state, the first thing I want to mention is with the optic. Here you get to see the optic now fully complete with the clear printed item in place. And you can see just how excellent it looks once fitted to the model. And it really just gives that extra little bit of detailing, which makes the piece look all that much more complete, as well as also realistic. However, the real magic was the parts that were added to the interior. So, with the hatch in its open position, finally, you get to now see the finalized turret interior. So starting from the right or working our way to the left, you can see the arm right over there with those cool guards that I was referencing earlier, along with that little button found in the middle. Just like the real one, this is what's used to elevate and depress the main MGs. Pretty sure that little button in there is the firing solenoid, which again, the solenoids are not hooked up on this model at this time, as the real example didn't have them hooked up. However, this here should give you a pretty good idea on exactly how everything is fitted in place and how it would actually function. Moving over takes us to the gunner's optic itself. As I mentioned before, there are two components fitted in place. The first is the actual lens itself, which is made out of that clear material that I was touching upon before. And now you can really get a good idea on what that thing looks like right there on the inside. And the other component to reference is the actual eye protector itself. Like I mentioned before, this is made out of cast rubber, and now that's fitted to the vehicle, it just looks like a dead ringer for the real McCoy. Probably one of the most favorite, or I should say probably one of the most enjoyable and interesting details that I designed on the entire CAD file, and it was also pretty fun making the molds and actually casting them in rubber, so that was kind of cool. On the sides here, we have the backrest now fitted in place. Here's one. And here's the other. No paintwork was required. They simply were just removed off of the sprue and then just glued to the appropriate locations. And once fit in place, because they were made out of rubber, it just lends itself for just, higher detail fidelity. All right, so let's go ahead and get the installation process started. I have my trusty green beret here to give me some help. So I'm going to readjust the camera to the portion of the vehicle that's relevant, and let's go ahead and begin with the mounting procedure. Okay, so the very first bit of equipment I'm going to secure on in place is the Jerry can. I have the webbing right over here, and I'm going to loop it through the top portion of the can. It will then snake over to this footman loop through the can holder, back around and up through this section over here to where I could then use the buckle. Like I stated in an earlier video, the V100s were unique because they had this extra footman loop over here, and this was done because of the shape of the rear plate. Because of that severe angle that this plate does have, if you don't have this extra support here, the can's going to want to topple over. So that's why they added this little bit of equipment. All V100s had this, and on the model over here, if we can recall, the piece is made out of wire that actually is drilled into the vehicle's hull to give it extra support. This is very important because it needs to hold up not just the weight of the can, but also with the tension of the strap. If you just take a piece of wire and glue it in place, it's not really going to work out too well for you. I also tried to install the strap without the can in place, and that was a bit problematic because of the buckle here. So we're going to have to do it like this. Snake it through. There are a multitude of different options on how you can strap these things with the layout of the straps, but I'm just going with this one over here because it was like this on the real example that I used as reference. And I'll just loop it in here for some extra tension. By the way, I'm not using any sort of adhesives whatsoever to keep this thing in place. It's purely being held in place with the strap. So from here, I'm actually going to go ahead and trim a little bit extra. When I made the straps, I purposely made them a little bit longer than they needed to be, just because it's better to have extra and you could snip it than to wind up being too short. So, there we have it. Jerry can fitted in place. Nice and secure. That little loop there really paid off. Let's go ahead and do the rest of the tools. All right, looks pretty good. Let me just tie everything in place. We'll be then good to go. Tell you what, I have a lot of respect for guys that do wooden sailing ships. her in here. Okay, so the tools are now fully strapped on. Stupid me, I nicked up a piece of shovel over here. I'll quickly touch that up. And then, well, that's really all there is to it. However, just because the tools are on, that doesn't mean I'm finished just yet. Come on, you guys should know me better than that. What it was missing off of the straps was the last little bit of accessory, which you can see here now finally added. This here are the little pull tabs, and basically it's a little metal clip that's found on the end of the webbing and just prevents it from fraying and prevents it from doing like it was doing to me before when I was trying to put it through those intricate loops. The details you see here are scratchable out of thin strips of aluminum. They are glued to the webbing and then painted black to the look that you see here. The little straps are supplied with the ECA sets. You get the strips of aluminum that you just simply bend in place and mount accordingly. You'll notice that the reason why I added them at this time here was because, again, I wasn't sure at the lengths of the webbing required in order to do the job. Obviously, you don't want to have these fitted in place when you don't know the length of the webbing. So once the webbing was secured and trimmed to the appropriate length, I went ahead and then added the final details to the look that you see here. With the camera readjusted, you get the final view of all the piece of equipment that I added at this time. And needless to say, it definitely fleshes out and completes the rear area of this model immensely. So while I was working on the tools, one thing that I noticed when I was reviewing some of the video clips and when I took a closer look at the model, I saw that there was actually some damage done to the trailer hookup section that we have right here next to the hitch. At some point, it must have been from me transporting the model from the shop to the display area. It must have rolled back in its little wagon and it made contact with this section over here, busting it off straight up cleanly and outright. Fortunately, the part wasn't too hard to fabricate. I simply just traced the surviving example on a piece of paper, transferred that over to some sheet styrene, and then I simply just cut it out and repainted it in the exact same manner with the exact same paints and the same exact painting orientation that I did on the remainder of the model. So once the piece is fitted in place, it just blends right in and no one else is the wiser. If you are watching this video and you saw the earlier scenes and you're like, aha, the piece is busted, you know, I got him on something. Yeah, I caught the damage, so it's been rectified. As you can see, the part looks, you know, as is, which is exactly what you want it to be when you're doing a repair like this one here. So with the repairs out of the way, the turret fitted back to its appropriate place, and with the addition of the tools and the jerry can, this model now, I can finally say these words, is done. That's right, this one is now complete. No asterisks, no other things to add to that sentence. It's done. we're done. A model officially crossed off of the to-do list. From here, it's just going to be housed in the collection. As you could already see, it's with some of the other models that I've referenced before in the past. And, well, that's it. Off to the next one, as they say. Obviously, the next one has already been started, which is the 1/6 scale M4A3E2 Jumbo, and I should have some more videos on that progress coming to see the light of day soon. Rest assured, there's lots of updates on that on the way. From here, I'm actually going to go ahead and film another video with this thing outdoors in its proper lighting, proper location, and, you know, that should be the final end of project video, as I generally do on these projects, but that's it. This one, build-wise, it's in the can. Of course, the final end of project video will be posted shortly after this one here, but with that, that wraps up this project update video for this 1/6 scale scratch build Cadillac Gage V100 Armored car. If you like this video, be sure to subscribe to this channel where it's a great way to keep up to date on new posted content, being 1/6 scale project update videos like this one over here, or the other smaller scale model showcase videos that frequently get posted to this channel. Another way to keep in loop of new posted content is by liking us on Facebook. There I have more photographs of this particular build that have been posted since the project start, along with all the other smaller and larger scale builds that have been seen on this channel in the past. Furthermore, don't forget to swing by EastCoastArmory.com for more 1/6 and 1/16 scale builds and detail components. Thanks again. I'll be seeing you all again on the next one. Take care.